Well, joining me now to discuss the whole question of time and place is Nick Bowles, founder of the Policy Exchange think tank, now would-be Conservative candidate for Grantham, Derek Draper, Peter Mandelson's advisor ahead of the 1997 election, and Bridget Fox, Lib Dem candidate for Islington South. Thanks all very much for coming in on your Friday night. Derek, is this trivial or did you cringe a bit when you saw James Purnell?
Well, I think that James is a very decent guy, and I imagine that this is more of a, I suppose it's quite late at night, so I can say cock-up rather than conspiracy.
I think we're after the watershed now. Won't make any difference to Gordon Brown, presumably. What will be the big factors this weekend as he's poring over all the things we heard about in Liz's report?
I think there's two big factors, really. The first is a sort of party political one, which is that Gordon is better positioned to win the election if he is identified with change. And every day that passes, he's less, by definition, able to be seen as the candidate of change. The second reason, which I think will weigh more heavily with Gordon Brown, is to do with what's best for the country. And I think that it's better for Gordon to say, look, I want a mandate to make some real fundamental changes to Britain. And that isn't going to take 6 months or a year and a half. It's actually going to take 4 or 5 years. It might not always be popular, but it's what I believe. It's going to be hard work. And it's better for Gordon, I think, to start afresh with that kind of time horizon, instead of us pretending that you can bring about real change quickly and easily, because you can't.
Nick Bowles, the figures are staring us in the face, certainly the YouGov poll and the Times poll, 41% for Labour, 31% for the Cons, the Libs somewhere on 17. You've been thriving off these great leads for Cameron in the last year. I guess you've got to recognise that things have turned around.
Well, I mean, polls go up and down, but I mean, to take polls at the end of one party's conference week when the main opposition party hasn't had its conference week is just absurd. It means nothing.
Well, they were almost as good before the conference.
Let me finish, Derek. I'm not saying that the polls at the end of next week won't mean... Of course, they will mean a lot. And clearly Labour is in a better position. We all knew this was going to happen. I mean, John Major had a 17% bounce when he became Prime Minister, which lasted for several months. This bounce is actually relatively small. So it's it's obviously concerning, but it doesn't mean that the election in 4 weeks' time, after campaigning on all of the issues and all of the cons that I think Gordon Brown is trying to put over the British people, that won't diminish that lead pretty substantially.
I mean, the facts actually, Derek, are the by-elections aren't looking so great for Labour.
Well, I mean, Nick's right in a way. It's silly to look at the polls and these by-elections and think that's the whole story. I think the real problem for David Cameron is if you look underneath the headline poll figures on conviction, on trust, on character, on leadership, on strength, he is way, way, way behind Gordon Brown. And I don't think that's going to change.
And Min Campbell, I guess. Bridget Fox, what's come down from your leadership on high? Are you all on election alert now?
Yeah, I think we've been calling for an election for some time. We think it's absolutely right that the people should decide, and we shouldn't have this kind of almost seamless hereditary kind of transfer of power. So we've been calling for election for some time, and, you know, Lib Dem's had a good conference, Labour have had a good conference. I suspect the Conservatives may not have such a good conference.
It's a tricky one for you, though, isn't it? Because the Iraq war ticket, which got you so far last time round, is kind of gone under Brown, isn't it?
Well, you know, we wondered about that, but I've been talking, my constituency is one of the most marginal in the country, and I've been talking between Lib Dems and Labour. And obviously, so I've been talking and listening to what people in my area think about this issue. And the issues that made them, frankly, hate Labour over Iraq haven't gone away. It's still an illegal war, it's still immoral, it's still unpopular. The issue of trust is still there.
Yes, but they don't blame Gordon Brown for the war. That's the difference.
No, Gordon's been in Downing Street throughout. He signed the checks for the war, and with David Cameron, he helped vote it through.
We need to get back also to this James Purnell case, because actually it's actually more significant than people are saying. Because what Gordon Brown has been saying is, I'm getting rid of spin. Okay? He appears in a dark blue suit against a dark blue background in his conference speech. That's not spin. He gets Margaret Thatcher to come to his doorstep. That's not spin. James Purnell doctors a photograph to pretend that he was with colleagues at a hospital. That's not spin.
He says he didn't doctor it,
seems to me a bit of a stretch. Actually, Gordon Brown has always been the master of spin, and he can hide his tracks. Well, we've got 4 or 5 weeks to expose those tracks.
So there'll be no spin next week from David Cameron then?
All politicians use presentation, but it's Gordon Brown who's made the claim that this is the new unspun age, and actually, as James Purnell is demonstrating, he's worse than anyone.
Yes, tell me about the money side of things. Is it right Lord Ashcroft is bankrolling all your marginals for £30,000?
Well, I mean, obviously you put more money into marginal seats because that's where the contest is. So does the Labour Party, and all of the parties are raising money from a range of donors, small and large.
Yeah.
Lord Ashcroft's donations are not in any way out of proportion with some of the big donors to the Labour Party.
This is a worry, isn't it? I mean, this is where the things fall down for Gordon Brown.
No, I think that, you know, Labour have also had people say that they'll fund the election. I think if it's called, it'll be fine. I think the problem for the Conservatives is that, you know, New Labour in 1997, they may have had a few silly personality scraps, but the strategy, the basic notion of New Labour was agreed by all the main people. Conservative Central Office today, you've got a seismic split going on between what George Osborne himself calls the Uber modernisers and others. The question for Nick is, you know, where do you come down? Are you an Andy Coulson man or a Steve Hilton man? Because they are pulling David Cameron apart.
Well, I absolutely don't recognise that story. The fact is the Conservative Party has a clear strategy, a clear alternative to the
George Osborne said that people didn't know what you stood for. No, you're potentially a month before an election.
We're at the end of a Labour conference. We're at the end of the week of the Labour Party conference. Last week we had the Liberal Democrat conference. Next week you have the Conservative conference. At the end of that you can judge whether or not it's clear what the Conservatives stand for. But what is clear after a week of the Labour Party conference is that Gordon Brown is trying to perpetrate a major con on the British public by pretending to be a Tory, by pretending with his line of British jobs for British people, when he was the one who let in 2 million people from the new accession countries into the EU without the constraints on their getting jobs that France and Germany
We're
had.
out of time. Very briefly, Bridget, I know you're giving up your job next week. What's your date forecast?
I think it's now odds on there'll be an election this autumn. And
October, November?
I think October 25th is a bit too early now. I'm expecting 1st or 8th November. But
Derek, can we get you to a date?
I would have heard would-be constituents, actually, 1st or 8th of November as well, I think.
I shall see you there.
All right, thank you all very much
I'll be voting for Emily
indeed.
Thornberry.